guys, so today I'm going to paint a water splash, a semi-realistic looking water splash. So first thing I'm going to do is start by sketching it out. Now I'm using a piece of paper that is 12 by 6. This is Arch's hot press, no, cold press. Arch's cold press, I'm sorry. And I am using just a basic koi watercolor pan set and some silver black velvet brushes. I'll mainly be using a size 6 and a size 4 round, I believe. And the colors I am using are cerulean blue hue and cobalt blue hue and some Payne's gray, and depending on how it goes I might need a touch of the Chinese white that's in there. So yeah, basically I'm just going to start by sketching my splash. I find it makes more sense to have it to one side or the other so that it's hitting one of the third lines. It makes a better composition. So for this one I think I'm going to do it on the left. And so water takes all sorts of forms when it's splashing. So if you really are not sure what to sketch, take some time and research some different photos of water. Now I'll probably mess this up because I'm nervous, but I just kind of play with it until I get something that makes sense to me. And bear with me here because I'm new to all this. So I lightly sketched what's going to be the front of the splash, and now I'm going to go back in and do what will be the back layer of the splash that's showing through here. Going to add a line. Below here we'll put some darker values. If you really study water, that's usually how splashes end up looking. I'm going to play with this a little bit. You'll get some like bubbly looking things coming off of here, little pieces flying off, little droplets. If I don't like the way something looks, I'll just keep playing with it until I do. So at this stage you kind of just have to, like I said, play around with it, find what you like. And now keep in mind, this back row here, you're not going to see every little line. You're mainly going to see the little edges that come up. we could use some more little drippies coming off. We might do a bit of a circle coming around the front of this splash. Some lines there. Alright. So, I'm going to mark, if you notice, when water is photographed, you get like a little edge around some of it. I think it helps to mark some of that out ahead of time before I dig out the paint. All right. So now I am going to take my number 4 round silver black velvet brush, and got my palette here. I am going to mix together some of the cerulean blue and cobalt blue. And really, color with this can be anything you want. You just have to experiment with what you like. And I do add just a touch of Payne's gray to that to tone it down just a tiny bit so it's not too crazy bright. So this color right here is what I'm going to start with. And I'm going to use it pretty watered down to just start going in and adding some life to this. Keep in mind the little areas that I've kind of left an edge here. You need some white space there to make it actually look like an edge. So don't fill in that whole edge with the color. Leave some space. Some of the tips that come up, the edges here, I come in all the way. I leave a bubble here and I come in all the way here to make that edge look very round. Because if you observe water, it essentially will look like a droplet that's about to break off. So you've got this darker part here and then a lighter bubble area there. Gonna do that with this one as well. And you'll find that I kind of just add things as I go. Whatever I think looks good. And that's, I've had people ask me to do this tutorial, but I don't really know how to explain things very well. So I guess just kind of watch more so than listen to what I'm saying. And some of this back stuff is going to be very light to the point where you're only just getting a hint of what's there. And I actually probably shouldn't have done this sketch as aggressively as I did. I should have done it a little bit lighter, but it'll work. Coming down the side, going to add a little bit here to make the impression that it's going into the water. And then where this curve comes around, we'll do a little. And this line that I put across here is going to be a darker color. I'm sorry if you hear a lot of banging in the background. We have kittens up here currently. And now down in this bottom area, you're going to get a variety of shapes. You'll get some little triangular shapes, some little rounded shapes, and I'm going to just sketch this area in with some lighter colors to lay it out, and then I'll go back in with some darker colors. And now this painting is done without using a direct reference. I'm not copying from a photo. I'm just taking what I have learned from looking at different photos of water and compiling them. Okay, so we're going to use the same colors. Again, I'm going to mix a little bit of a stronger batch of those two colors with a little more Payne's gray in this round because I want a darker version. Okay. So now I'm going to start going in, laying in some of the darker spots. And one thing I have noticed with doing water is that you have to be careful not to be too heavy-handed with the darks, because you want to keep the appearance of translucency, so you're not going to want to cover, you need to leave a lot of white space. So like these back areas may just get a teeny tiny bit of the darker color in the darkest spots. For the most part, you're not going to see a lot of that in the back. And you'll get some random spots, let's say here, where you get a darker area. So that bottom area is still pretty wet. I'm gonna let that go and continue working on the top until that is a little drier because I don't want it to all run together down there. So I'm going to water down this darker color that I just used. Use it pretty lightly. And I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna start adding some texture, because when water moves, you get these little lines showing the movement. And now you really have to be light-handed with this, because if you start getting dark, heavy lines on here, it's not going to look right. Just got to keep it light, just so there is a hint of movement there. Now back in here, I may get some, that's a little bit too dark, get some more water here. I may get some slightly darker areas mixed in there. Again, we'll have some more movement lines here. And they're just very faint at this point. You don't want to overdo it. I'm going to take the same color and I'm going to start laying some of our water that is surrounding the splash down here. So when you look at water that has these little lines across it, you generally have some darker areas and some lighter areas. So right now, the areas that I'm painting right now will eventually be a little bit darker. I'm just kind of laying them in with this color so I know where I'm going with it. I'm going to extend that. I'm not going to fill up the whole page with water because the focus here is the splash. So I'm just going to extend it a little bit past where I'm working. And we'll get some over here. I'm going to take that color and put some more darkness on these little lines that we made. Now that bled a bit, so in a second here, I'm going to fix that. Just going to take my handy dandy paper towel and get that little blob that was there. Obviously, I don't have a lot of technical terms for what I'm doing. I'm just kind of doing. I do need to darken up this line. And I'm going to add some irregularities to it. Some little triangles coming off of it. Some higher spots, some lower spots. We don't want it to be a perfectly straight line. You don't get a lot of those in splashing water. Okay. So now we will take our darker color. This area is still wet, but I am just going to lay in a little more pigment down there. Start getting some darker areas going. While that dries a little bit there, I am going to take almost straight Payne's gray. It's going to have a tiny tinge of the blue to it. And if you don't have Payne's gray, you can use lamp black for this too. Just water it down a bit. But I'm going to start doing some of the little details that are really going to start making this look more real. So pardon my reach here, but I'm going to, and you want to be really light with the dark colors, because there's not a ton of darkness in water when you're doing this sort of thing. It's just enough to add a crisp edge to it, and that contrast makes it look more real. Again, I'm still using my number 4 round. I'll probably just use that for this whole thing. And in water you get strange little shapes. So I'm just going to add some of those here and there. Let's see. Let's do a little bit on this guy. This one's still wet, so it's bleeding a little bit, but that's okay. And keep in mind, you don't want to like outline the whole thing in black, because if you look at pictures of water, it's not how it is. You just want to add little touches where the contrast is the highest. Especially like these little bits that fly out, these little droplets, they tend to have a lot of contrast on them. And that's what makes them pop. I always tend to forget about these little guys. I need to keep up with them. So I'm going to use that same color I've been using, the Payne's Gray or Lamp Black, whatever you have. And I'm going to go back into those lines we did. Just add tiny, tiny accents of black. You really don't want much. Just enough to show some of those lines, because some of them show up as darker blue, some of them show up even darker. You also sometimes get almost, the little lines are so small that it's almost like dots. So you can add a few of those here and there. Okay, is this bottom part dry yet? No, it is not. I am going to pause the video and use my hair dryer to dry this area so I can go back in and work on it. I will be right back. Alright, so I just dried this most of the way with my hair dryer. And I'm going to take a mixture of those blues with quite a bit of Payne's gray. And I'm going to go in and start adding some depth to these shapes that are in here. So you may get some like upside down, some U's, some triangles, random shapes. I'm going to add some darkness. I'm going to continue some of that darkness up into the rest of the painting to kind of tie it all together. I'm also going to take a very light wash of the same color that I'm using for these dark shadows and add a few darker spots up in the rest of the painting. Just kind of helps to tie the whole thing together if you have some of the other values mixed in to the rest of the piece instead of just having only this heavy dark area down here. So now I'm going to start taking some of this and adding it to our water that it's sitting in. The water is fairly simple, just gentle side-to-side strokes. Adding our darker areas with our lighter areas. And definitely make sure to preserve some white space, because you can't really get that back. I'm going to take some diluted Payne's gray and really go in and add some darker areas down here to tie that into the darker areas up here, so it all makes sense together. Same water, it's got the same variety of colors going on in it. Now I think the water area could use a little more of the blues, so I'm going to mix up a little fresh batch of some blues. Same blues I've been using. Water that down. Just add a little blue back in. Just very lightly. Because like I said, if you have the water too much of a different color down here from the water up here, it doesn't look like it fits together. And because the textures are already so different between the splash and down here, we want to use some of those colors to tie them together. Alright, so now I think I'm actually going to extend this out just a little bit further down here. Alright. And now I'm going to do some final touches with some pure lamp black. Now we already went in and darkened up some areas pretty well, but I want to go back and just do some very fine details with the pure black. That really makes the whole thing pop and continues to bring the reality to another level with this. And like I said, use the black very sparingly. You don't need much at all. Just some little hints. Just add a little more darkness to some of these areas down here, and we are almost done. May work just a teeny tiny bit of lamp black and down here, just create a few deeper shadows. Tiny bit. And there we have it. Make sure you sign your work.